Today's video, I got together with three of the most prolific contributors to the 3D printing tabletop community. Evan Carothers of EC3D Designs, Ryan Beasecker of Hoard, and Devon Jones of OpenForge infamy. Wylock dubbed him the Thingiverse sex symbol. I think it's the most appropriate nickname I've ever heard. This guy's a champ. As you'll hear, he's been in it from the beginning, and I think each of these people has a special place in our community, whether you recognize their names on Thingiverse or not. Today's is just a chat with them about the state of 3D printing tabletop and what they're working on and how they kind of got together to collaborate on the Force of Oakenspire Kickstarter and what's coming from them in their specific projects. This is something I hope to continue doing in the future, and I hope to get other contributors, other modelers, maybe in open discussions or one-on-one interviews. If this is something that you'd be interested in hearing more of, or you want to hear from specific modelers or anything, or have specific questions to ask, please let me know. This is new, and we're a pretty small community, the 3D printing tabletop community, but I think this is quality content that I wanted to hear. I spent 2 hours after this talking with Evan and Devon and Ryan. Maybe it was more like 1 or 1.5 hours, but honestly we went on for a long time after just talking about stuff, because we love this, and I think there's a lot of people in this community that love this. I will say this was our first time doing this, so please have mercy on us. We're going to do better, I think, next time, of making sure to show everybody's faces so you can see everything instead of just jumping. That was on my part. It was a technical error. I take the blame for that, for not having tested that, but I think that the quality is worth it. It was a great conversation, and it was really good discussion with everybody, and I hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. This is something that we've been talking about for a little bit. Evan and a couple people. I just want to introduce everybody so everybody knows who's here. I gave a little brief intro before, but I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to just say who they are, so that on top of the little captions or whatever the names. I guess we'll start with Devon, if that's okay. If you could just say hi, who you are.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Devon Jones. I'm the founder of OpenForge. I've been making 3D models in the gaming space since like 2014. And I've got like a couple hundred designs on Thingiverse.
Great. Ryan.
Hey, I'm Ryan Beasecker. You might know me as Karufin on Thingiverse, and I run Hoard.
Yeah, awesome. And Evan.
I'm Evan Carothers. Happy to say that I got into 3D modeling for tabletop gaming, honestly, with Devon and Ryan as my two biggest influencers, and I'm thrilled to be in their company in this conversation today. So I'm Carothers on Thingiverse, and happy to be here.
Great. So for those of you who are watching, the idea for today is to have kind of a fireside chat. I'm obviously not a modeler, but I'm very interested in growing this community, and I think a lot of times these modelers are people who are kind of behind the scenes. You don't even recognize the name sometimes you download it, and you see all the time the people that are posting in the forums and in Facebook and different places. You'll see their models and you don't even realize it. And so I want to take a time to get to know them better, understand what they're doing right now and what's coming up in the future, as well as what they're running right now. Just some of the interesting things that that people, I think, in the 3D printing community want to know. So just quick question. I know a lot of us talked a little bit about where we came from, but I think the biggest question we're going to get is, what are you printing on? What printers do you use, and what's your favorite? Devon?
So I have a Prusa i3. I made the Prusa i3, like I had actually pulled the plans down and went and got it water cut and such. I had a printer before that, Prusa i2. When that was hitting the end of its life, I decided to make that one. About 6 months ago, GearBest reached out to me and gave me a Tronxy 5X. So I used that. And then I recently just got an Anycubic Photon. And they all have different strengths. Tronxy has actually been surprisingly really good. It does really, really tall prints. That's a weakness of a lot of other printers. It also has a very nice build plate. The Prusa, I know it inside and out, so I can fix anything, and that's a pretty handy part. And then the photon, man, the stuff that you can get out of that looks like injection molding. It's friggin' fantastic.
I've heard amazing things, honestly. We're all jealous.
Absolutely.
How about you, Ryan?
I've got 3 printers at home here. One is the Monoprice Maker Architect, which is basically a FlashForge creator clone. It was my first printer. It only does PLA, doesn't have a heated build plate, but it does have a rectangular build plate. So if I need something a little bit longer, I tend to print on that. But I also have 2 Monoprice Maker Select V2 printers, which I think they're a little bit lower on the quality scale, I guess, but they still put out great stuff. You can mod them out very easily, and I'm basically printing exclusively in ABS right now, so I get to smooth stuff. It's easy to clean up. Yeah, it's really great.
Little jealous. I mean, definitely, I love the ability. I don't like the difficulty of ABS and PETG, for example, but yeah, that's definitely an advantage. I don't think it's covered or talked a lot about when we talk about it, but and it's great that you work with Monoprice, because I think that as a brand in general, the printers I think that are most accessible. A lot of people end up getting them as their first printers. But awesome. How about you, Evan?
Yeah, similar to Ryan, I got my first printer as a Monoprice i3 Plus, which is the same as the Wanhao i3 Plus. I bought it thinking I was getting a good deal. I bought my first 3D printer with no knowledge as a open box refurb, which led me to almost quit 3D printing before I got too far. Fortunately, I have a background in electrical engineering, so I was able to fix a lot of the issues that happened.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that printer with some Z brackets and a couple of really lightweight mods is an unbelievably good printer for under $300. Sure. And then my main printer now for a lot of detail is a TiVo Tornado, which is a Creality CR-10 clone, which is a great printer for $100 or $350. So that's the 2 I'm running currently.
Awesome. So I want to move on to talk a little bit about your modeling process. How you guys come about with the designs and how you got started modeling. So if we can start with Ryan, what was it that made you start modeling and consequently Heroes Hoard?
Well, it kind of started because I didn't know anything about 3D printing at all. I knew that, like 5 years ago, printers were extraordinarily expensive and you could only print very small things and the quality sucked. But I was screwing around on the internet and I saw a link to Miguel Zavala's Monster Manual collection. And I thought, oh man, like, okay, now I'm really interested. Now I'm going to think about getting into this again. And I learned about Thingiverse. And like you said, there's basically, when I got on, there were 2 guys doing all of the, 28 millimeter fantasy stuff. Yeah. Dutch Mogul and of course, Devon Jones. So, once I saw what was available, I said, okay, I'm going to buy a printer like today, right now. And found one on Monoprice. It was under $300. My first inkjet printer cost more than $300. So I got it. And for the first 2 months, all I did was download other people's stuff. And I felt like I had downloaded hundreds, if not thousands of hours of other people's work, like the amount of time that they spent modeling. And one day I just felt like I had to give back. I have to try to make something myself, offer it on Thingiverse so other people can download it. So I started researching, modeling programs, and I went through probably 10 of them before I found some that I was really comfortable with. And for me, it starts with obviously an idea. Sometimes I'll do a little sketch, but I tend to work in a CAD software first. So I create like a primitive if I need to get my math right. If something is scaled for a particular thing. So I do a primitive and then I bounce it into a program called Blender where I essentially add all the detail. And then, you prep it for printing, and that's basically how I do it. Now that might be very funny to people that really know what they're doing in modeling, but it works for me. I understand how that all works. So
this is a judgment-free conversation, Ryan.
He's not going to feel bad about what he said when he hears my process.
And it's interesting that you mentioned going through a bunch of programs. It's one of the reasons I'm kind of hesitant. I've tinkered with Tinkercad because it's so easy.
Yeah.
But it's like, I am pretty scared of that knowledge gap. I feel like I'm learning so much about 3D printing every day. I'm hesitant to go into the modeling, and I feel like right now I need to leave that to the heavyweights. So Devon, you were one of the people that Ryan mentioned as being around, since the beginning. Talk to us a little bit about how you got started and, what your workflow is like.
So yeah, I have actually a interesting story on this. So, I used to live in New York City, and I was a member of a hackerspace there called NYC Resistor, which is where MakerBot was founded out of.
Okay.
So I know all the founders of MakerBot, Adam,
Wow.
Bree, and Zach, and they're the guys who founded Thingiverse as well. So I was there for kind of the birth of the home 3D printing stuff, hanging out, watching them screw with this stuff in hackerspace.
Wow.
Then my wife got pregnant, and we decided to move out of New York because that's what you do when you live in New York and your wife gets pregnant. And, I've started to, become more like domestic life, and I've decided to finally get myself a 3D printer. And it was right around the time that OpenForge had done its first Kickstarter. And I received all those tiles. And while I was waiting for them, I started messing around with some 3D modeling. And I did some absolutely horrific dungeon tiles that you can see is the first thing I ever submitted on Thingiverse, and messed with that. And then the Dwarven Forge arrived, and I had started messing with it, and I'm like, hey, this is really cool. I was running a game at the time, and was using the tiles, but I'm like, God, I really need more of these, and this stuff is expensive. Mm-hmm. So
yes.
I decided to start messing with the 3D printing, because I just gotten the printer, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot at this.
Yeah. So
I started off messing with Sculptress to just make some rocks, and then I'm a programmer by trade, so I pulled up OpenSCAD and was cutting off little faces on it, and of the rock face, and then basically pasting it onto just rectangular boxes, and that's actually the first dungeon tiles that I made. And then since then, I've just continued to iterate on that process. I only use SCAD now. I use it a lot for, I don't know, if I'm modeling something that is fixing a kitchen part or something. It's really good for precision. But then I've mostly shifted to pretty much entirely Blender for all of my modeling. At some point, I should probably actually invest some time in looking to Tinkercad. I feel like I brute force my way through this a lot. And, then somebody comes by and shows me something, and I'm like, oh, that would have been so much easier if I would have known you could off in Blender and have it do it for you. Damn it.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. I'm a newbie when it comes to that, to the 3D printing space. So it's amazing to hear that you've been around since the beginning. Evan, how about you?
Yeah, as Devon mentioned, I'm a programmer as well, so I've always kind of tinkered in everything software and technology. I have a very vivid memory of when I was in middle school. I had a computer teacher who was really kind of instrumental to my, adopting my love for technology. And we had some 3D modeling programs. I don't even remember what it was at the time, but I remember one year of middle school, I ended up nearly failing a math class because I spent all my time that semester modeling a version of R2D2 that I spent hours on trying to get to render correctly for 3D. And then I haven't touched 3D modeling since then, but I'm relatively artistic, I'd like to think, separately. So when I got into gaming, relatively recently, I used to play a lot, but got into it relatively recently again after a hiatus. And I don't do anything partially. When I get into something, I just figure out how I can dive headfirst into it, and fell in love with the making aspect of 3D printing, got my first printer, started printing all of, Ryan and Devon's models. I remember just I'm like, I just spent as much money on True Tiles as I spent on my printer, like the day after I bought my printer. So it was I mean, great for
First
Ryan.
collaboration of Heroes, Hoard, and
So,
EC3D.
right. And then I just figured, it's so crazy. I mean, you look at something like the Tabletop Crafters Guild or any of those big communities, the possibilities of the designs are endless, right? And there's room for 200 more amazing modelers in the community, right? So I thought, why not throw my hat in the ring and try to build some stuff that's fun for me? The thing that really turned me on to 3D printing in the first place, I guess, as a medium was that, resin, dental plasters, railroad type stuff, all of those materials are really fragile, easy to break. You print something good at a PLA the right way, you can throw that thing across the room and it's going to hold up if you've painted it decently enough. It has a good coat on it. It's easy to pack and store. The clipping system for tiles are way better than something like OpenForge, which is, a wonderful product that started this whole terrain revolution in the first place, but it's heavy. It doesn't pack good. I mean, it's a perfect storm of all the right aspects, and I just couldn't not be involved in that. So, I mean, I got into it and just kind of been a fun ride ever since.
Yeah. And, when I started, I'm really newbie here. I started playing D&D. That's what I do my 3D printing mostly for is D&D. I run a 5e game, a weekly 5e game. And I started probably a year ago playing D&D, and I started with papercraft, this little tutorial I found online, cardboard, before I found DM Scotty and before I found the Tabletop Crafters Guild. And I had a friend who had a 3D printer, and he's an engineer, so he's a brain when it comes to this stuff. He printed me a couple of things for my game, and I used it so much that my players saw that I really appreciated it, I really liked it, and they chipped in and they got me a CR-10. And it took me a month and a half to get printing because I'm totally techie noob. There's a reason I started this channel for others, because I sympathize with those who struggle at first. Mm-hmm. And I had a relatively easy printer to set up, and it was still so hard for me. It was a very steep learning curve.
Danny, a question for you. We've talked about this briefly, and I know I've mentioned this to, I think, both Ryan and Devon separately, but when you think about the general gaming community, people that are doing crafting, people that are doing it for tabletop gaming particularly, I mean, what percentage of people do you think own or have access to a 3D printer? I mean, it's got to be less than 1% of people currently. I mean, it's definitely rising, but it's so small, and it's going to change a lot.
Here's what I think. I think there's maybe 1,000 anywhere, and these are wide numbers, I think maybe 1,000 to 6,000 people that are in the tabletop gaming space that have 3D printers that are actively printing, actively buying stuff from the community makers that do it for profit. There's probably a lot more that, tinker every once in a while, buy something from Thingiverse, will print it from the library or something like that. And the Tabletop Crafters Guild has 150,000 people, right. If I'm not mistaken. That's not including all of the other communities outside the sub ones like Luke's, APS, and all of the other groups. Right. So I would say, 1%, less than 1% would probably be fair based on what I've seen. The interesting thing is that I think of that 1,000, 6,000 people, it's a really engaged community. These are people that are actively voicing their opinion, telling you guys what they want. I think you guys have so many requests. And I'm glad that there's something like Patreon that wasn't popular a couple of years ago. This and Kickstarter, I think, are interesting mediums. We can talk a little bit more in depth about it later, but I think, things, even in the last 6 months to a year, I can see where tabletop 3D printing was a year ago versus where it is now. And it's neat. We're going through a revolution. Evan, that's what I think is happening, to be honest.
Right. So much good stuff is coming out right now. I mean, I'm buying a bunch of stuff, and I produce a bunch of stuff, and I'm buying a ton of stuff, and I can't even half the stuff purchase it. So. Yeah,
the beauty of 3D printing compared to resin printing or resin models and stuff too is there's a couple of really amazing hand sculpting miniature workshops and stuff that do really amazing lines, but they're little guys at home, right? They do a 100-piece resin production, and then that's never on the market again. You create a really nice 3D model, that's going to be around forever, and it's going to be exponential.
I've actually thought about that before on the open source aspect of like the stuff that I do, is that like I'm sort of creating a floor for the industry that's permanent, right? Like anything that's lower than that quality just isn't like viable in the future because it's always there.
Yeah, it's
And
free
it
and available.
will be there.
That's a great point.
For sale stuff, right? It's always ratcheting up.
Mm-hmm.
I think an interesting point about that, Devon. I've seen one of the things that I've heard from other printers, other hobbyists that print your guys' work, is this concern that now there's such a low barrier of entry for a hobbyist to make a model, put it on Thingiverse, or charge for it, and that issue of concern of, I'm getting this digital product that I have not been able to print. I'm paying $10 to $15 to $20 for this product that's supposedly high quality. I'm seeing a finely flocked, a professionally painted finished model. What's the raw model going to look like? What's it going to print at 0.2 millimeters? And there's this kind of concern that there's so much new stuff that's coming that a lot of it isn't quality. And do you guys feel like with all the new competition per se that's coming up that it's a good thing or a bad thing? What would you guys say?
Oh, I absolutely think it's a good thing. And the reason I think it's a good thing is, as we noted, there's like at best 1% penetration in the gamer space. But the more people who are doing this, the more people will see the stuff that's 3D printed. And the growth of the market of people coming into it, like it's just it will continue to draw people into it. And if you're working on models, like I look at a bunch of the stuff that's on Thingiverse, and there are a few other modelers that I see from time to time who produce some really interesting stuff. But there's not very many who produce like a good volume of things and like support the stuff that they're doing. So over time, it's going like, well, if you do Fat Dragon or me or printable scenery when it comes to tiles or Heroes Hoard, you have like you can expect that eventually there'll be a curved piece or there'll be like these esoteric pieces. And like if you're looking at somebody who just kind of pops in and does a few models, they produce like some walls, a corner, and a door, and like they dabble with it, and that's fine, that's great, and they're adding to the community and they're giving us stuff to remix, but it's not much of a threat. It actually helps bring more people in.
Yeah. Ryan, I think you are the most commercial entrepreneur of the three of the modeler group here, in the sense that you run Heroes Hoard. I know Evan, has a couple of sets on there with you, and that's the way you kind of get your funding for the work that you put in. How do you feel about so many new people coming into this space?
I think it's great. I really think it's sort of a double-edged sword. Like I totally understand and agree with what Devon was saying, that, this is a community where we are trying to create as much stuff for our tabletop RPG games as we can. And I feel like the more that we add, sort of the more inspiration we still allow other people to bring in. Like more is almost always better. And here's my however. As Devon was saying, that we get new people that want to come in. They say, I just downloaded X program. I'm gonna make a whatever and throw it on Thingiverse. There is a world of difference between being able to design a model that looks good in a computer and being able to design a model that looks good, that can be 3D printed correctly or at all. And I think one issue that I see is that Thingiverse is littered with models that are not printable or are broken. And one of the problems that I had when I started was I didn't know what manifold was. I didn't know what self-intersecting surfaces was. And I had probably 50 or 60 failed prints or models that broke apart because I didn't know what those were.
Sure.
And I didn't know that I needed to look for them. And now when I grab something off Thingiverse, I almost automatically run it through NetFab or Mesh Mixer just to fix it before I even check to see if it needed to be fixed, because this is sort of the habit that I've gotten into.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I think more people, I think this is an exciting time to be a part of this community. I love seeing what other people are doing. I love encouraging others to, hey, yeah, you need something for your game. Why don't you make it? Because chances are somebody else also needs that thing.
Yep.
So, and as looking at it from sort of like, hey, I'm a business owner and I am doing things that are commercial. It just means that I have to step my game up too. If more and more great modelers keep producing great stuff and it's on Thingiverse, if I'm going to try to sell stuff, I need to step my game way up too. So for the person that wants stuff for their gaming table, that is a win-win. So
as a buyer of said sets and said models, I agree with that. It seems, I think for the most part, there's a lot of choices. And so there definitely is incentive for the modeler to make a product that prints as good as possible on the lowest common denominator, the crappiest of crappy printers, with that user that just doesn't get it, that is struggling, because those are the people that are going to be the squeaky wheels that go on Facebook and they say, this print sucks and all that stuff. And we know that's not true, but this is the voice of, this is what the people in the Tabletop Crafters Guild see, and they say, oh geez, maybe that sucks, dude, those layer lines, ugh. And they don't realize that printing terrain, like, that's really not that big of an issue. Yeah.
Right.
But just to ask you, so Evan, you've got talking about these unique models, things that are different, challenging the creativity, like Ryan was saying, of existing models. You've got a Kickstarter out right now, Forest of Oakenspire. You've got these big tree sets, these airships in there, a lot of stuff that I know people have been talked about. There seems to be a lot of that going on right now. How do you feel about so many people coming into this space right now? Hey, you've got competition. There's 9 other Kickstarters going on right now.
It's a great time to own a 3D printer, whether you're, selling to people on Kickstarter or buying from people on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I agree.
One really cool, unique thing about this space that every one of us here can attest to is that there's no world in which you decide you want to 3D print for tabletop gaming, even if you want to become a commercial designer like all of us did, and not start with Thingiverse. Like, you get your 3D printer, you set it up on day one, you're pulling free models off Thingiverse, and you spend hours searching for random things, like trying to figure out what people tag stuff with. No 3D modeler in this space will not intimately understand the challenge and the struggle of being a user on Thingiverse. And the value of open source stuff. That beautiful model you finally find, and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be perfect. And then having that model never print because it's completely, disastrously modeled. That is a challenge that every designer will always appreciate. We're all as much a consumer as a seller. Every one of us is in this because of the passions for gaming, because we want to put stuff on our tables. We're all printing each other's models. It's interesting because there will be more and more people that have 3D printers that are willing to purchase models. There's always going to be more noise in the space for Kickstarter. There is something to be said for trying to kind of build a name for yourself in terms of, what differentiates your modeling. And one thing that I really think is a really interesting artistic piece of the whole modeling process that I really appreciate about Devon and Ryan's models, as well as myself, is that, there's a lot of people that are like professional 3D modelers, like people that produce video games, that do things like that are professional trained modelers. None of us are professional trained modelers. We're guys that love to do the hobby, that got into it, that managed to find some artistic abilities in ourselves to make some cool stuff that can look good when it's printed this big, right? But at least for me, the really unique part about it is understanding the printing process, understanding when you're making something for FDM printing or even resin printing. Sometimes the beauty in a piece for printing is not in just how the presentation is when it's finished, but how you can tie the curves of lines together to not require supports at a certain angle, how you can build things for a certain layer height to understand what most people have for their consumer printers, and just kind of understanding the exact need of the customer that you're building that model for. And that's stuff that I think goes underappreciated a lot of the time because people don't know exactly what goes into, really designing a good model that can be 3D printed on, 98% of consumer printers without having to understand the intricacies of it. So
Yeah.
I think that's that intimate love and understanding that all of us have gone through with 2,000 failed prints and the small pieces of that really lends itself well to the modeling process. And that's the edge that I think we'll have at least going forward for a little while in the modeling department. But the more the merrier. I mean, bring the models on. It's great.
And we're seeing, I think, one of our the first people who's really dabbling in the space, or I shouldn't say dabbling, who's doing excellent stuff in the space, who's I think clearly comes from a professional background, is Duncan.
Yeah, he's great.
Just amazing.
Oh yeah. I mean, check this out, you guys. I mean, look at this thing. Look at this thing.
Yeah.
Look at this thing. I mean, and honestly, it's just.
Yeah, you can now get a resin printer and see how great that looks.
Yeah.
I know Devon's going to hold it over us at one more point in this conversation.
Well, Duncan, look, man. Let's be real here. I think, we hear this all the time that FDM printers can't print good quality, and there's no denying that resin is better. But when you have bigger models like Duncan makes, those epic models, that literally from Reaper, it's not like the little the unpainted whiz kids that it's like $2 or $3 for each mini. I mean, that's an understandable cost, but the big dragons that are like big, they're going to cost you $20, $30. Mm-hmm. So when I can print that for $5 and when I can print an epic Duncan model that would cost me like 30 from Games Workshop for something comparable, like, hell yeah, man, I'll pay the $10 to Duncan and get that one model, or become his patron and get a lot more. Mm-hmm. And he's amazing. I mean, that's one of the areas I know you guys do terrain and you're just starting to do minis in some cases, or you've done, but I am just really excited for more of the professionals that have this passion to be able to kind of come in. And I'm okay with the Patreon or the Kickstarter model for those high quality printable models and I'll say this, I don't want Miguel Zavala's feelings to get hurt, because the guy's a national treasure for this space.
He's an international treasure.
Yeah.
An international treasure. I mean, it's amazing what he's done, and I think he's shown us the possibilities. A Nothic would cost me like $8 from a little Reaper, and I can print it because of him, just for that one section of Lost Mines of Phandelver, Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's amazing what he's done, and his models have progressively gotten better as time has gone on. But he's not a pro, and that is an obvious statement. So I agree with you, Devon, 100%.
I think it's fair to say too, though, that you sit down with the goal of saying, I'm going to print every monster from every SRD piece of literature ever published. You got to sacrifice quality for volume in there a little bit, and he found the happy medium.
Yeah.
And I think he's taken, I mean, you can see progressively, like years ago, as the years have gone on, and you look at his original work, like his goblins compared to now, the human models. Let me see if I've got one. Yeah, like look at this little guy. This little guy is like this Diablo monk, I mean, that's like, just looks so cool,
Yeah, that's
and
great. Yeah.
The detail's great. I mean, of course, it's not a resin. We need an anycubic for that, but the photon.
Yeah.
But my point is, his skills have developed too. So as a hobbyist, he's taken it to the next level too. And it's just gonna get better. I mean, you guys are right. It's an amazing time. It's so fun.
A weird inflection point. I think it's so unbelievably early, and I think the three of us, are lucky to have the opportunity to work in this space at this point. And as Ryan said, we have to stay competitive and continue to improve our qualities. And I mean, the thing that I think is amazing is all three of us do this as a hobby. I mean, this is not our full-time job, right? We're guys that love to game, that figured out how to do this as a passion, to be able to support, some of our modeling and stuff. And we all are active contributors to open source, which gets us nothing but pats on the back. And it's a really interesting space that I can't think of any other space that replicates this, anywhere else. It's pretty fun.
That's how I felt when I joined the Tabletop Crafters Guild. And as I've kind of grown and gotten to know you guys and other members of the 3D printing tabletop community, I feel very similar in a even more niche way. So I have a question for you guys. You guys are in a unique space, and I think I'm glad that all three of you could come together with me, because even though you all have different projects going on, you've chosen to collaborate for for your Kickstarter in this case, but in the past you've collaborated too. But I think this is the first time I've seen a Kickstarter where there's collaboration from multiple different designers or modelers, and all for one release that is competitive. You guys are competing with each other, but at the same time collaborating. So, how did that happen, and why did you guys choose to do that?
Oh, I bribed him. I didn't tell you about that.
Okay, commissions aside, you're still in competition. That's the bottom line, right?
I think that we've all had really good experiences with each other on Thingiverse and on the various Facebook groups. And I think that over time, we're developing a lot of respect for each other, and that creates like a desire to go like, hey, you're doing really cool stuff with this kind of thing over here. Like, can you, are you willing to help me with that? Because like, maybe I'm not as good with trees or, like on and on. And that's just a way that kind of has been building towards us working on something together.
Sure. Ryan, any thoughts?
I guess I just don't really see these guys as like full on. It's not a full on competition. I guess for me, like I have the utmost respect for these guys, and any chance to work on anything with them, or and going forward, I would absolutely love to do some big collaborations where we all work on a particular component and maybe it all goes together at the end or whatever. But no, I really don't see these guys as competitors. I see them quite honestly more as friends, all interested in the same goal. You know what I mean?
Cool. I felt
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan was gracious enough to kind of bring me in as a partner to Heroes Hoard a little bit. I was modeling for a long time and wanted to get more in the collaborative space, and I started doing drive-through RPG, and they did a good job in expanding their platform to support models, but it wasn't really built for that. And I mean, as I mentioned earlier, Ryan's models in Heroes Hoard are truly what got me into modeling and my earliest inspiration for doing this. And I reached out to Ryan, and I'm like, Ryan, you're killing it, man. I'd love to help you in some way and kind of expand Heroes Hoard footprint. And he's gracious enough to let me come in on that a little bit. And that kind of continued forward to the Kickstarter. And I wanted to try to do something a little unique in the Kickstarter space, as a dude with a hobby and, limited free time. I thought, I'm not the only guy like this. There's Devon and there's Ryan in the modeling space that are killing it. And there's other guys out there. There's map makers, making 2D maps. There's guys like you, Danny, that are doing video stuff. There's people, illustrators, people in all these spaces with Patreons, with things that all tie into a hobby that we all love. There's got to be a way to, bring us all together in some capacity, foster some connections. And, when I kind of pitched that a little bit to both Devon and Ryan, they were like, yeah, this is awesome. This is why we're doing this. So it was a pretty easy sell to those guys to collaborate. And we tried, to give back to each other as we can through this process. And I think it's forged some pretty good bonds that I think will continue to manifest in the output we do in the coming months.
I think that's a testament to the community you guys have built. All of you were here long before I was. But, the fact that you built this on an open source kind of, hey, I want to give back to the community. I want to build on something we've got, I think has really helped foster that kind of collaborative environment that you guys are participating in. I mean, it's not all like that, right? Definitely everybody wants to perform and wants to be recognized and compensated a lot of times for the time that they give sometimes. So I get that. But that doesn't mean that all the free work and the free gifts, even if they're late or whatever the case might be, the free models, it's amazing. So kudos to you guys. So I have a question. I know I kind of touched on the freemium model there, that everyone sells their models in different ways, or sometimes just gives them away in certain cases. Some people use Kickstarter, some people use Patreon, some people do like a website kind of like Heroes Hoard or Drive-Thru RPG, where they'll give like a sample set and then they'll sell the rest of the premium files. How do you guys see that relationship, that dynamic, moving forward in this marketplace? We'll start with Evan this time, since he's always been last on the last couple questions.
Not a problem, man. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, Thingiverse is the go-to, especially for new printers. You know, if you have a question about something, obviously your instinct as a human being with, you know, money is to try to find it for free first and foremost, right? So you're going to try to figure out something that might meet your need. If it's not there, you might check out a paid source. If you become a fan of a few vendors, you might, you know, in some cases check their stuff first or follow their Facebook groups and see releases that interest you. It's an interesting thing with 3D modeling that I fell into myself. You know, sometimes I had a whole, you know, swath of sessions planned in the campaign, and then I see one cool new 3D model come out, and I'm like, yep, I'm changing my entire storyline so I can build it around it. And I think that will always continue to manifest, right? Because you see that beautiful piece of art, and you're like, yeah, I can push a button on my printer and come back after work, and this is now the centerpiece of my new campaign. So, and making that as accessible as possible is always going to be you know, obviously when you have a business, you try to find ways to optimize the marketing around that. And I've had pretty good success with that by doing, you know, kind of sample releases on Thingiverse to show the quality, the printability of products that tie to the full releases. That's something I kind of replicated from Ryan that he had going with really good success. And separately, like the first real thing that I got into 3D modeling with was kind of an adventurer's campsite that I built where I'm like, all right, I'm going to try to do something that I haven't seen yet that's really kind of missing. And I stole stuff from people. I mean, I actually had to go back to Ryan. I'm like, dude, I used some of your non-commercial models in my models. Like, please forgive me. Can I please have permission to use this? I was using Devon's weapons in there. It was just a Frankenstein of stuff. So that use case is never going to go away. There's always going to be that one random thing like, okay, I got a campaign. I need to have an upside down goblin on a stake, you know, with another goblin throwing him a ball. Like, how the hell do I build that? There's always going to be those weird edge cases. Yeah. And the baseline stuff is going to get fleshed out, but it's Thingiverse is a good marketing vehicle for, you know, driving to commercial sites. And one problem I see in the space as a consumer is that if I decide I want a model, I have to look everywhere, you know, drive through, search Google, search websites. There's like 5 Facebook groups to try to consolidate, you know, where modelers are posting stuff. It's really a bit of a cluster right now. So I think there's some work that can be done there to collaborate or to consolidate, and bring all that into a more searchable way for consumers. Sure. And that the freemium models, I don't think ever going to go away. You know, you're going to always find people on Thingiverse, and that's the lifeblood of the community. I mean, you know, Devon built that early on. It's the same thing. You know, we've seen this in programming. Open source fosters trust. It fosters collaboration. It fosters a really good community. So that's my take on it.
Cool. How about you, Devon? You know, he mentioned that you built this community. You were a big part of one of the foundations, right, that we're going to be building on in the future, as you said earlier. How do you feel about other people, you know, coming in and charging a lot of money for their models that, you know, you give out of the goodness of your heart to the community?
You know, it's originally I was sort of having some mixed feelings on it. Sure. And you know, I was like looking at going like, wow, I just watched this Kickstarter go and, you know, make $100,000 on I think that the first time that popped into my head was when it was the first Fat Dragon Kickstarter. It did like 120,000. I'm like, huh. Wow. Maybe I need to
rethink.
Like, you know, a big part for me on this is that like, I have a really bad miniature habit. Like, I have a bad miniature habit, a bad terrain habit, all of that. And like, if I could basically make this as my hobby be something that was basically self-funding, sure, I'd be pretty happy with it, right? Because like, I'm pretty unconstrained because of this on like being able to just buy like this gaming thing or that gaming thing. Because, you know, I'm bringing in some money from it. It's not gonna mean that I can like quit my job anytime soon, anytime in like the next decade. But it's enough that I'm able to fuel the habit that my wife is already mostly okay. She once said that, you know, like, look, you've got a miniature habit, but it's better than you having a hooker and blow habit. So I'm okay with that.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, I've got like open source does have its origins in the software community, and I've got a long history on open source type stuff. Are you guys all familiar with PC Gen?
I'm not.
Yeah, it's a character creator for 3rd edition, 3.5 edition Pathfinder. Okay. And I was the architect on that for a couple of years. So like I did that some time ago. I also have Pathfinder app on the Android store called Pathfinder Open Reference. That is once again free. I don't know. I just like doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So wait, are you playing Pathfinder or 5e these days?
I'm actually playing both. I am running a 5e game and I'm playing in a Pathfinder game.
Cool. You excited about the second edition?
Yeah. I think the like Pathfinder. I really like Paizo. I think they're a great company. And I was a little sad actually to be going back to Wizards of the Coast with 5e. 5e is so good. I really like what they've done with like inspirations and the backgrounds and like running a monster in Pathfinder when you're like your party is like 15th level and you're dealing with a dragon, and this dragon has like 35 feats and 20 different spells or whatever. And as a GM, you're like, what do I have this thing do this? I have to know so much stuff to be able to roll at a high level that like the mental overhead on it is just so hard to have any of your creatures like be what they're supposed to be. And like 5e just made all of that simple. And it's like greatly freed up my GMing. I like the flexibility of Pathfinder. I really like how you can make any character you want with it, not just like, oh, this is the wizard, this is the cleric. Yeah. And I feel like 5e is better about that than 4e was, but it's still not as good as Pathfinder is. So like, I love them both. They're just different.
Ryan, real quick, what are you playing?
I'm still playing D&D 3rd edition. I never jumped on the bandwagon to 4, and honestly, I'm getting too old to keep changing systems. So,
wait, when you say 3rd edition, are you talking 3rd edition or 3.5?
3.2.5, really. Mainly 3rd with some Pathfinder and 3.5 spill.
And you, Evan, are you running 5e or an older version or?
Yeah, right now I'm doing all 5e. I'm in a weird position where every single person in my gaming group is also a DM, and we have like 5 campaigns going at a time, so it's very interesting. All good. Yeah, all good.
That sounds sweet to me. I'm a forever DM so far. I'm relatively young in the D&D space, but yeah, my players are happy with anything I put in front of them. Basically, I'm very fortunate.
Count your blessings, buddy. You got to start getting creative pretty soon.
I'm already getting there, but like you said, I print something. I'm like, I know what that's gonna be. This tank is gonna be in a gnome stronghold, even though it does not fit at all in a fantasy world.
Right.
But so question, you guys. Devon, in your case, you've printed quite a bit of. I feel like there's a difference in style in the modeling and the models that you guys do. Devon, you are a master of tiles. You've made different versions of tiles. Ryan, I see you as the set guy. You have all of these different, little sets of scatter that can go different areas, and you do that really well. Evan, you're this kind of big concept guy where you mix in these maps and these concepts like that concept art of the airship in the forest. I was like, wow, I would never think of a forest this big for an airship to go through, and you kind of merge these two, and then on top of that, the sets that you have in Heroes Hoard kind of all go together. How has that modeling affected, your gameplay, or is it your gameplay that's affected the modeling?
Tough question.
I know it's
I knew
loaded.
you were going to throw a trick one at us.
Let's start with Ryan. I see the wheels churning.
Yeah, no, for me, it is absolutely both of those answers. I typically when I'm planning something, I will create a model that I actually need for a game that I'm running, and that's usually how the things sort of start. Because if it was something that already existed, I probably would have bought it already. So I tend to model things that don't really exist for purchase. Sure. So I definitely model for the things that I need. But man, some of these guys will drop a model on Thingiverse or something one day, and I'll have to stop and say, okay, that's the new campaign now, because now I have to print that thing tonight, paint it, and get it on the table tomorrow. And now this is the new. So it's a very fluid, and I mean, and that's really what I think, RPGs are kind of supposed to be. But Yeah, my game is constantly influenced by other designers and what they create, and it comes out of left field, you know.
How about you, Evan? I'm curious because I think you thought a little bit ahead for this Kickstarter and collaborated with so many different people because you wanted this kind of, I intentionally do make a decision with other designers, so I'm gonna just make this Kickstarter about that. This kind of collab.
I'm really glad you think that, because honestly, so much of this is taking shape just split second. It's
fooled me.
Honestly, like I've backed Kickstarters with the intent to do exactly what you said. Like, yep, my campaign now changes, a month from now when the episodes we hit, we're going to be in this whole new unknown alien landscape and all these new models are going to be there. And then the next thing comes up and I back that one or I buy something else. And the ones I've just bought, I don't even get around to using. It's moving that fast.
Yeah.
And I'm totally fine to support the community in that aspect. Right. But it's there's a lot of stuff around it. And you can get analysis paralysis pretty fast doing it.
Yeah.
And the beauty of 3D printing, I mean, unless you have 30 printers, it's self-regulating. You can only print so many things in the course of like 2 weeks, even if you print, the maximum of your build plate nonstop. And thank God that limitation is built in, or I don't know what I was before anything in my life. But it's, I mean, it's both ways, right? Like, definitely adding stuff here and there from different things. And I really like, and I know, Ryan and Devon both this as well. We both came from a traditional crafting background. I love throwing cardboard and foam and stuff in the mix. I love pulling inspiration off the Tabletop Crafters Guild and doing flocking and getting my hands dirty with the traditional stuff, because that's kind of the origin of the root of this whole thing. And one begets the other, definitely. You can ask me the day before a campaign where I spent 2 weeks planning models and printing things and painting for hours and hours, and I might change my mind the next day because I see something else or something changes. So that's the beauty of the DM's choice, right?
Yeah.
How about you, Devon?
So when I started doing the 3D printing stuff, I was running Rise of the Rune Lords, which is the first adventure path from Pathfinder.
Yeah.
And I ran that for like 5 years.
Wow.
So you can see in a lot of my early models, they're actually tied to locations in Rise of the Rune Lords. And so like a lot of stuff I was doing really early was focused on my game. Oddly now, most of the stuff that I use for my game is stuff that I buy from people, largely because like my planning horizon for what I'm releasing and my planning horizon for my game don't necessarily coincide really well. So like I have a town in my current game that is entirely built with Ryan's models, the Raven's Hollow buildings, and like other things of that nature where I'm picking them up from other people because I can't keep the two planning horizons connected. So like eventually a lot of my models get used, but it's not like what I'm designing is actually not anymore influenced that much by what I'm running.
I hear you, and I feel like you're such a software developer, and you're talking about these timelines and all this stuff. I'm just like, man, that's awesome, dude.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember a time and not too long in the past where I'm like, I'm going to make an oven for a kitchen. And then 2 sets later, I built like an entire inn and I have it put on a tabletop, but it's like, I got to design these models.
And he mentioned,
I want to be respectful of time, you guys. We've been talking for a long time. The conversation's been awesome. I do, just want to kind of wrap this up. We've talked a lot about the state of 3D printing and tabletop, but I want to know what each of you are. I mean, if it's okay, if it's not top secret, confidential information, what's coming up next for each of your different projects, for OpenForge, for Heroes Hoard, and for EC3D. Devon, how about you? What's next?
Okay, so I'm working on trying to get all the different tile sets that I have to actually have like a coherent basis. Like all of them have curved, all of them have windows, all of them have doors, all of them have certain kinds of things in open lock. So I'm trying to like normalize that so that they're like clearer sets, because I know a lot of people have had trouble because there's just so much that they need help with, like, how do I start? What do I print? And like, oh, I wanted to do this design, but it doesn't have curved yet, right? So like, I'm kind of trying to backfill that in. And then I expect there's a pretty good chance I'm going to be going after castle type stuff.
Ooh.
And then beyond that, I haven't done one for a while, but I really like doing the OpenForge encounters stuff, like the
shrines.
Yeah, the shrines. So I am actually considering working on a shrine for each of the alignments. So that based sort of around the planes. So like the lawful evil one will be diabolic. The chaotic evil one will be demonic. The true neutral one will be like druidic, yada yada. So I'm kind of in early stages of figuring that out. I had a good time with doing the wizard's sanctum, but I haven't. That was for a conjurer, but like I haven't been able to come up with something material for like what is an abjurer's sanction or sanctum like, right? Like, what do you have in an abjurer's place? I don't know.
Yeah,
so that one's. I'll at some point I'll get back to that. Obviously, necromancer is easy, and I should probably knock that one off. But like some of these are like,
Yeah. How about you, Ryan? What's coming up on Heroes Hoard?
Well, this morning I released a set of 10 trees.
Cool.
But I've got a lot of feedback from the town accessories that I did and people wanting more stuff. So I've actually started, working on a second set that'll have a lot of more agricultural, stuff to sort of fill in your towns. But I'm also working on a number of different things, like there's some stuff for, Evan's Kickstarter that's top secret that we can't talk about.
Oh no.
There's just and I still am trying to fill in Thingiverse, but yeah, there's so many things going on, and my biggest problem is every day I think of something that I go, I have to start working on this, and somehow that sort of knocks the thing that I already have 10 hours in out a little bit, know? So I really need to just buckle down and just like take things to completion before I move on. But I see something shiny and I got to go for it.
ADH modeler, I have that same problem.
How about you, Evan? What's coming up next for EC3D?
Yeah, obviously I'm in the tail end of a Kickstarter here that's wrapping up in, I believe, 8 days at this point. It's my first Kickstarter, so it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate both the support that both of these wonderful gentlemen have given me in that process as well. So, hopefully as these things tend to trend, we'll get a little bit more, action at the tail end and unlock some cool stretch goals. So I'll have some modeling work to do for that. But separate from that, after the fact, for release on Heroes Hoard, I've been working on a dwarven brewery / distillery that I think is going to be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then I've been talking to both Ryan and Devon about some interesting collaborations that may happen. So just keep an eye out for that. We haven't solidified anything yet because these things take time, but sure. I think we've all really enjoyed the process of working with each other, and we've had to determine what that looks like in any kind of solidified manner. But I think it's going to be cool.
That's exciting. I'm excited for really everything. I know I seemed a little overexcited for the shrines because I like those. I remember when Devon was making them in Tabletop Crafters Guild, and he's like, do you guys want more? And I said, yeah. And I'm not even a huge tile fan, but once I get the tiles, they are going to be the first things I print. And pretty much, the quick things I use are the scatter. Ryan, to your point, it's so easy for me to just drop down in a room a couple of sets of crates and say, oh, this is what you see in the room, instead of having to do each individual crate, which was my problem when I made these small little scatters. And 3D printing is like, whoop, and it's PLA. I can drop it, like you said, Evan.
You throw it in the air and have it land like dice.
Yeah. Dramatic entrance, elephant drop. But and Evan, conceptually, your forest reminded me. It took me back to like EverQuest, which was my first video game love. These forests and these things that of course Star Wars too, but with Star Wars Legion, this is really cool. You have little Ewok areas, right? But definitely just, you guys are doing awesome stuff. And as a consumer of your products, I appreciate it. I think I speak for the greater community when I say thanks. I hope this is the first of multiple, and maybe 6 months from now, we're talking about all the different stuff that's happened, and maybe there's a second Kickstarter around the corner that we can be talking about. But I think there's really great things to come. I'll be sure, for anybody watching, I'll be sure to include links to all the projects that that Devon and Ryan and Evan, have talked about that are going to be going on. So if you want to check them out, you can. I highly encourage you do. I know Devon has a Patreon for OpenForge. Ryan has Heroes Hoard, and Evan has EC3D and has models on Heroes Forge as well. I said Heroes Forge, Hero Hoard. I'm so sorry about that. I'm sure somebody would have corrected me if I didn't catch that. So, but yeah, any final thoughts that we want to kind of share before we wrap it up?
I mean, tune in for episode 2 of the best looking guys in 3D modeling, including the sex symbol of Thingiverse, Devon Jones.
I should have mentioned that in the first place. Obviously, I mean, kudos to Wylock for giving the best name for any model.
Oh man, he just took it. Now me and Ryan can't. Like, what are we supposed to get?
I'll pass that back to Wylock, or maybe somebody, maybe Greg FL will help us give a good name for one of you guys, because I'm not that creative. But thank you guys for joining us, and thanks for Evan for kind of bringing up this idea for us to get together. I'm really glad it worked out, and I hope this has been valuable. And again, I'm glad that this happened. Thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks again for being here. As I mentioned earlier, Evan, Devon, and Ryan all collaborated on the Forest of Oakenspire Kickstarter that still has a few days left. So if you're interested and want to check it out, I've included the link below. I've also included the link to Devon Forge's Patreon. He could be making a lot more money and has chosen to contribute in a free way. And Patreon is a simple way, I think, that people can contribute to him and make sure to recognize the work that he's doing for our community, so we don't have to be buying Dwarven Forge. But as I was saying, I'm also going to put a link to Ryan's Heroes Hoard, where you can find both Evan and his designs available for very affordable prices, I think, for what you get. Really great sets that I've picked up and that I'm going to be using in my own games. Thank you again. As I mentioned, if you enjoyed this format, I'd love to hear from you. If you're new to my channel, welcome. And I hope you stay. We're going to be having more of these, and it's going to be driven by really what people want to hear and who people want to talk to, outside of my interest and the people that I want to speak with. But thanks again, and happy printing.